Stand by for the Brewery Underground podcast.
In Nashville's heart will rise, craft and brews will meet the skies. Steve and Scott, they lead the way, Brewery Underground night and day. Raise your glass, let's ignite, in this city we unite. Raise your glass, let's ignite, in this city we unite.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Steve, and of course, he's Scott. And yes, we are the Brewery Underground podcast. And, Scott, we take on a lot of different avenues sometimes here on the podcast. Sometimes we talk beer. Sometimes we talk about breweries, and we talk about, rating beer. Well, today we're going to be talking about malts. And the guy to do that with us is Brent Manning. He is the co-owner and co-founder of Riverbend Malt House in one of the best brewery towns in America, Asheville, North
The
Carolina.
best brewery town. I like that.
Ah, yeah, the best.
Kind.
I would die on that hill.
Brent, thanks
Brent,
for
welcome.
coming today, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
before we hit the record button, we were talking about a great many things involving, water and things that you guys do and for breweries. And I'm really curious, Riverbend Malt House for people, our audience. I know I started researching this a couple of weeks ago when we knew we were going to have you on. Let me just say that your website is such a plethora of great information, and hopefully we're going to do a lot of education for people once we get done with this podcast today. But in kind of simple terms, can you give an overview of what Riverbend Malt House is?
For sure. So we're a craft malt house, like you say, located in Western North Carolina. And what we do is we bring locally sourced barley, wheat, rye, oats, corn, etc., into the malt house and put it through a 3-step process: steeping, germinating, and kilning, to create a variety of different malts that are used in brewing and distilling. And to kind of step back and define malting, what we're basically doing is managing the enzymatic digestion of the cell walls that are inside each and every kernel of barley, corn, wheat, rye, whatever, and managing that conversion process as they convert to a starch or simple sugar. And so obviously we kind of set the table for brewers and distillers by making these starches and simple sugars readily available for the mashing process. The coolest thing about making malt is, these 3 steps are the same regardless of scale. We're one of the larger craft malt houses in the nation. We're going to produce about 5 million pounds a year, which sounds like a lot until I tell you that Sierra Nevada and Mills River takes in about 1 million pounds a week when they're processing at full bore. We, even at that eye-popping clip of 5 million pounds a year, we're a rounding error for what the craft beer community looks for just in the Southeast. So it's a pretty wild topic to wrap your head around. Most of the Southeastern states grow about 500,000 acres of small grains, and we only need probably a couple thousand acres to supply the malt house with those grains.
Brent, and this was one of the things as I was kind of researching you guys and stuff, is malt, I'll let you tell me, are malt and grain the words kind of synonymous, or are they two different things? Malt kind of makes up the grains, right? Or grains make up malt?
Grains, we take grains to make malt, and we can malt a lot of different things. So I can malt pumpkin seeds if you send them to me. It's really, the mechanics are the same. We're just essentially tricking the plant into growing by creating the perfect conditions for that growth to take place. If you're a gardener, who's ever taken like tomato seeds and put them in a wet napkin in a plastic bag to get that jump on that spring crop, it's the same mechanics. We're just hydrating a seed to a certain level, typically around 45% moisture, keeping the temperature and humidity in place to allow that plant to continue to grow. And the trick is, though, as maltsters, we don't want to let the plant actually begin to photosynthesize. So we're just wanting that early growth, that sort of starch reserve that the plant uses to kickstart its growth and get up through the soil And before it can begin to photosynthesize, that reserve is what brewers and distillers are tapping into to then eventually feed yeast. We want to feed
And is that
instead of the plant growth.
okay? Is that process, is that germination?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
steeping, germinating, and kilning are our three main steps. And it takes about 7 days to execute that process, regardless of scale. So we'll do a 2-ton floor malt batch or a 10-ton, what we call GKV batch, or a germ kiln vessel. Now our friends at the larger malt houses will do 250 to 500 ton batches. Process is the same. Barley doesn't care how many of its friends it's surrounded by.
Okay. There's a picture on your website, and it's probably one of your malt houses or warehouse or something where it's spread out on the floor, right? And I think it even says something about you guys still kind of hand rake the thing
Yeah.
out there. Talk about that process. Is it because when you see the picture, it looks like maybe there's a certain level or a certain amount or a certain depth to that all the way across. There's probably some science behind that, right? So they do what they're supposed to do correctly.
For sure. Well, floor malting was where we started. Our first Malt House 1.0, we had a massive 1-ton batch, which is ridiculously small. But we did it all floor malted. We were just trying to understand the processes and the nuances of making malt. And the best way to learn that is by floor malting. You're literally in touch with the grain every day. You spread it out on about a 4 to 6 inch deep bed. The germination process continues on. You've got a nice, cool, humid room. The rootlets, as they begin to grow, kind of bind up. Yeah, they call it felting, and we'll pull a rake through that material 3 times a day, morning, mid-afternoon, and late evening, gently breaking that felted material apart, mixing the grain that's in the bottom to the top, getting some fresh air in there. And basically what's happening is we're keeping the grain kind of under control by doing that. If that felted layer on top continued on, it would basically act like a blanket and lock in all the heat that's a byproduct of that germination state. So even if the room's 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the bed temps can hit 100 Fahrenheit quite easily. Wow. And so at that point, you've got all the building blocks for some pretty nasty things to start growing, molds, etc. And so we really want to make that raking event happen in a steady cadence and keep everything nice and cool in there. And you get this nice sort of sinusoidal wave of the heat building, the rake occurs, and then it drops back down. And this is kind of one of the key differences between floor malting and what we call pneumatic malting. Is pneumatic malting at larger scales is basically a uniform temperature throughout. Floor malting, you kind of get this rise and fall. And researchers think that that's part of the differentiating factor of what makes floor malt taste different, is you've got this sort of rise and fall that may favor different enzymes versus the standardized sort of, this is the temperature, it's 62 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 days, and that's all there is to it, So floor malting is kind of the historic deal as well. I mean, that's how people made malt long before we had the Industrial Revolution. And so malt houses of old were vertical. And so the malt would take one trip up, steep in a tank, drop down into one floor. It would go through, it would have lots of cross ventilation, lots of windows. They only malted in the cool months. So it only went they'd start in September and stop in April, and lots of cross ventilation. And then once germination was done, it would drop down into the kiln, dry the grain down, build some color, and then they would package it off as finished malt in yet another floor below that. And so they built up. And so that's how the old malt houses look. Once we had, motorized augers and blowers and all kinds of things, malting took on a very different turn. They built something called a Saladin box, wherein all the augers were in a row and the grain was much, much deeper, like a meter deep. And they blew air from underneath in addition to turning it. So lots of different technologies came about with the Industrial Revolution, and batch sizes got bigger, malt houses got larger and more efficient. And I guess that's sort of the history of malting in 3 minutes.
No, it's great. What do you, because you have that picture, do you still do some floor malting too?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
What kind of percentage is that versus pneumatic?
It's about 10% of our product line right now. We've got several customers that, they've got a dedicated beer or spirit that this is part of the personality of that product. And we typically will use that. We'll also use floor malting as our R&D process. So if we've got a new variety of barley or wheat to test out, or we want to, get a feel for a different kilning recipe, we'll start at that 2-ton scale and make small mistakes first, and then scale it up into the 10-ton system.
It's like a small batch system, like a brewery might have,
Absolutely.
right? They can still make some small stuff and kind of put in the
Yep.
tap room or screw up if you want to, but before you mass produce it.
Yeah. It's and it's definitely been helpful. Like I say, we've got customers that want to explore in that space and build a custom malt, and we can use that 2-ton malt system for those types of projects as well. We were talking about water chemistry earlier. We've actually done a couple of batches where we're actually tinkering with the water chemistry of the steep water to mimic a Belgian malt house's water profile, as a way of sort of seeing if that affects flavor, germination rates, etc. So we're able to really play around and do some fun stuff with the 2-ton.
A lot of science that goes involved in this, isn't there?
It is. And that's really the fun part for us, is it truly is one of those art and science things, because, each year over year, just like wine grapes have differences in their crop year, barley does too, not as pronounced, but like crop A from 2024 might require a little bit more time in the steep cycle than the crop from 2025. And we don't always have a great answer for why that's the case, but it just is. And so we know that, oh, hey, look at this. Avalon from this year's harvest or this farmer's lot needs 2 or 3 more hours in the steep cycle to get the same target moisture as it did last year. Make a note of that and put that into the recipe going forward.
Hey, on your website, as I said earlier, your website is fantastic, riverbendmalt.com. I'm looking at this section where it has like standard malts and talking about shot by a type of grain. Can you go through a lot of that? Because it's very fascinating, and I would imagine for brewers, they have to love this page, because you have so many different things on there, that different styles for different beers. Can you go through a little bit about that?
For sure. Yeah. So, we what we're basically trying to do is walk people through, the flavor profiles of each of the main products. Most of what we sell, no surprise, are barley based products, but we spend just as much time, educating folks about the heirloom rye that goes into our Carolina rye product. We want them to know, like, hey, this packs a little bit more punch than the standard, mass produced stuff that you might have come into contact with. Here's a flavor wheel that introduces you to some of the main, top line flavors that we're picking up. Here's kind of a basic spec sheet, and here are some styles that we think this will work well in. And then when it comes to base malts, we're just kind of trying to help people make connections with certain flavor profiles, and then also like where some of these products will fit in and replace products that they're more comfortable using, let's say. So like if you're a home brewer that specializes in, British or English special bitter, extra special bitters, what am I going to do? I don't see a British pale ale on this. Well, we have a product called Southern Select, and that's kilned darker than our traditional base camp, which is our sort of workhorse base malt. And the discussion points in that webpage about Southern Select kind of clearly define, like, hey, if you're building a pub ale, this is your base malt to start with. But yeah, you're exactly right. There's because people are coming to this website with from a lot of different backgrounds, and
I would think
we try to help people find their way from a lot of different pathways in, and help them build recipes. Because we really, it sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes we actually will lead off with customers by saying, please don't put this malt in your flagship beer, because your flagship beer is your flagship beer. And maybe this will it's going to make it different. Might be better different, but it's going to be different. And so we kind of like to walk people in with, here's the flavors that we picked out. We suggest you do the same. We'll do the hot steep with them. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to do that, but it's basically making malt tea that's the same concentration that a brewer will create in the brew house. And we'll build some teas, sometimes even doing complete recipes in this way, so that people can get a feel for the mouthfeel, aromatic profile, all these things, so that we kind of want them to build a recipe from the flavors that they perceive. My opinion is just that, my opinion. So
Yeah.
we kind of want to get the wheels turning, and then have them say, oh, yeah, no, I get that flavor note, Brent, but I'm over here. I want to do a dunkel with this, not what you were thinking about. And so that's really why we lay out all of this information on the website, is like, if you can't have the one-on-one with us, we hope there's enough sort of breadcrumbs there for you to find your way to a new recipe that's of interest to you.
And how often have you heard back from folks that have used these where they're like, what kind of success stories do you have from folks that you've been able to help?
A lot of them, we've had a lot of fun. We're always looking for like the what's next in the beer trends and whatnot, so like when hazy IPA blew up, I was like, we don't have any oats. What are we going to do? And so we started with a naked oat that we called streaker oat, so no hull on it, and had this beautiful almond character, and people were really excited. We got some good feedback. But the one thing we heard was lautering was kind of a pain. And so we were like, okay, well, we also have hulled oats, traditional oats. And everyone was like, they used those and they were like, oh my God, this is perfect. We get the mouthfeel of oats and we get beautiful lautering. And I was like, and I was talking with a friend of mine, Jen from Wicked Weed. And she said, well, so of course you're going to call the product Hull and Oats. And I was like, well, am now, like, because that's fantastic. So we had some fun with oats during the hazy IPA run up. And then as lagers came to the forefront, we really took this opportunity to kind of try to deliver as much diversity in the Pilsner malt space as possible. Again, kind of back to the varietal and back to the farm aspect. We really spent a lot of time zeroing in on, what does variety A versus variety B taste like in its unblended, unadorned format. Very low color malt, not a lot of tricks in the malt house, just straight ahead. So what we started with was Chesapeake Pilsner. It's all Violetta barley, and you get nice sort of floral, grassy, sort of dry, crispy profile out of this malt. And that's perfect for German Pilsner. And we had another variety called Calypso, and now a new one called Avalon. It's more bready, rounded, sort of melony kind of character to it. And we're like, that'll be great in a Helles. And, so having some folks, come back to us and they're like, yes, that German Pilsner was absolutely fantastic. Like, y'all killed it. And I was able to, displace one of the big sort of international stars of malt, Wireman, in a few occasions, like where people were like, this malt was good enough. I'm putting local malt in place of a classic German malt for a German beer style. And
that's fantastic.
Anytime you get that kind of a phone call, that's a good day.
Yes.
We have said on here in the last 4 or 5 years, and it may be a combination of things, of our appreciation more of lagers and pilsners in the craft beer, but I think they've gotten better. And I was given 100% credit to the brewers. Hey man, you guys are making great lager beers and they're fantastic. And then we start researching you, and I'm like, wait a minute, it starts with you guys.
That's right.
It's definitely a partnership, no doubt. Again, we want to sort of lay out a buffet of options for brewers to build lager recipes with. The most recent step we took was, as Czech lager started to bubble up as sort of the latest sort of subgenre for people to explore. Yeah, and again, this is going to get a little geeky, but let me roll for a minute. And
go ahead.
So if you look at a modern Pilsner malt, it's pretty much what we would consider fully modified, meaning brewer or maltsters pushed it as far as it can go to maximize sugar delivery in the brew house. So most beer for your buck, basically. And that's great. kiln nice and light. So we still have that piece of the story in place. Light colored, crispy Pilsner, but maximum extract. So when we looked at the certificate of analysis for Czech Pilsners still coming out of that part of the world, we said, wow, look at this grain. This is really under modified material. Like this could be a real disaster if we handed this to a brewer and they didn't know what they were doing, because they basically have to step mash or decoct this material to get to sort of finish out that conversion step of the process. And we said, well, most of our customers do not have the equipment to step and decoct, but but there's also a flavor change that happens. The less modification you allow to happen in the malt house, you really keep that sweetness component at bay. And so we said, well, what would that look like if we sort of took a few steps in that direction to make a crispier, drier, under modified Pilsner? How would we do that? Well, we starve it with moisture, and then we would keep germination shorter and cooler to sort of tamp down all that germination energy. And so we kind of took those steps and said, okay, here you go. This is going to be a little bit more complicated to the work in the brew house. You might need a little bit more conversion time. If you want to step or decoct, you can, but here you go. And we had a brewery, a group called Rock Solid in Georgia, win a medal with the Czech Pilsner and another one of our products, Double Kiln Munich, in the Czech Dark Lager category. And that was pretty special. Again, anytime you put local malt into an international category and take home some hardware, that's an awesome day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I think about this. Scott and I were out at a couple of breweries over the weekend, and I think about some of the beers we were drinking, whether they were lagers and Czech lagers and things like that. And then I think, you know what? Also, what about like pumpkin beers? And then we've been into the style lately. Every once in a while, we'll try them where it's like a peanut butter and what was it? The blackberry.
Oh yeah,
Blackberry.
Marble Fox.
Yeah, Marble Fox that we had. And so,
Interesting.
as those kinds of things have evolved, we know it's not maybe the typical brew that you're going to see at every brewery across the United States, but you see it popping up. How do you guys keep up with those sort of trends?
I have a great answer for the heavy adjunct stouts and all of that. All I would say is that we would make something that sort of plays nicely with those flavors. Kind of give a brewer a solid base to jump off from. Typically when they're putting that level of adjuncts in, anything I'm doing in the malt house is going to get washed away.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you said y'all were at GABF. Did you get by Cohesion?
No, I didn't get to Cohesion.
Next time you're in that area, I was thinking Czech lager specialists, and
Are they in the Denver area or just one of the outlying towns, cities?
Yeah, they're in Denver.
Okay.
They are big fans of craft malt as well. They work with a group in that area called Troubadour. It's that same sort of lovely relationship of these malts make these types of flavors, and it's sort of traditional Czech process with local malt mixed into it. So they've got a neat story going on there.
Oh, that's cool. I just wrote them down because we're always looking for new. Not that the Denver area needs there's
Right.
so many places, but we're always looking for places with recommendations when we get out that way because there's just so many,
Oh yeah, they're great.
Hey, before we go any further, we're all drinking beer. At least I think Steve is. I don't know if I saw you drinking one yet.
Yeah.
And Brent, what are you drinking? And I want to ask, do you have Riverbend Malt House in that beer?
I actually don't, but there's a chill in the air right now here in Asheville, and I have an Ondex Doppelbock in the refrigerator. And this is an absolute banger of a Doppelbock, classic style. They just nail it, and it's I don't even know what malt they use in it, but it is just a beautiful beer. And
it's that time of year, like it's
that time of year.
You know?
We need something with a little bit of heft to it, and I always forget. They've been making beer since 1455.
Wow, you think they know what they're doing yet?
I think they figured a few things out. It's pretty special.
God,
Man, I have got this Zool There you go, right here.
Oh yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
adjuncts, actually
Yeah.
that's probably just a double IPA, right?
Yeah, this is their double IPA. It's got Citra and peach tangerine in it. This thing is pretty good, man.
Nice. Yeah, Zool's making some big waves in Tennessee. They've
Yeah.
They are.
making some
They're in our
big
backyard or about to be.
acquisitions. Right on. Okay, are y'all based in Nashville?
Nashville, yeah.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, I heard Marble Fox. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Marble Fox is great. And then so Zool's thing is they're taking over the two Southern Grist locations that are
Well,
here. So that's
Yeah.
we love Southern Grist, but it's exciting also at the same time.
For
Zool
sure.
coming to town.
Yeah,
We'll
definitely.
see how that shakes out. But I've got one, and it's Steve. You know about these Stokehouse,
Oh yes.
and they're new. It's their
Yep.
West Coast IPA, and these guys were at Tenfold prior. Brandon, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew Tenfold, and the cool, and I wish I'd had when I thought I bought it the other day, but I didn't. Stokehouse, I believe, is a customer of yours.
Yep, for sure.
They buy your
Yep.
for their signature beer, I believe, which
Yes.
is their dark English ale. I think because he told us when we were talking to them recently, he brought your name up specifically, the Riverbend Malt House.
Yeah. Great folks there. So excited to see them kind of jump out and do their own thing. It's Nashville's got a beautiful beer scene. We do a bunch of stuff with Stokehouse, Tenfold, Harding House, and Tennessee Beer Works, Brew Works. Yeah, so we've got great representation in the center of the state.
Yep.
Which makes total sense because one of our major farmers is located just about an hour north of Nashville, right near the Tennessee-Kentucky line, and we get a tremendous amount of material from them. So that's kind of Tennessee's breadbasket right there, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
That area of the state, and then also in between Nashville and Chattanooga, has some good barley growing areas as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before Chad mentioned this one, we actually heard about you from two other breweries that we've had on this podcast. Actually,
Okay.
both of them twice. Eric Latham, who is Johnson City Brewing.
For sure. Yeah, he's
He
great.
brought you guys up one time, and then Anthony Davis from East Nashville Beer Works brought you guys up. You guys, I think you provide one for his Tennessee Pills.
Yep.
There's a Tennessee Pills thing that you do. So your name has come up multiple times prior to today.
Yeah. We've done good work in Tennessee. It's it's followed our general playbook is go out, get a grower or two from that state that grows good barley, work with the material, and then go back and visit the brewers and distillers and say, here, we've got XYZ products developed with material from your state. You can isolate it. We had great success with, we had a Cumberland Pilsner that was made with 100% barley from Tennessee, and then we also have a malted corn from Tennessee. So we had tons of folks making beautiful American lagers with those two ingredients. So people got a lot of traction at market with it's 100% Tennessee grain now.
Yeah. Brent, I tell you, when Scott had told me about you guys and we were going to get you on here, and when I started doing a lot of research, one of the things that really I wanted to hear about was when you all started this up around 2011, I believe.
Yep.
Can you really recall when you started talking the first farmers and breweries and others about trying to bring everybody together? I mean, how did those conversations start?
Yeah. So the early ones, I can't say enough wonderful things about North Carolina and Virginia's ag extension programs. They did exactly what they were designed to do, which is connect a market with the growers that make those products. And so we started very early on talking with the small grain specialist at North Carolina or NC State's ag extension program. They connected us with some barley growers early on. We did some test trial stuff, even working with the researchers who are doing, small scale variety trials that are, 1/10 of an acre plots or smaller. They sent us home after a couple of meetings with, burlap bags full of stuff from these trials. And so humble beginnings, my co-founder, Brian Simpson, so I was the home brewer. So I had all the homebrew gear at my house, and Brian had all our early malting gear in his place. And that consisted of a galvanized metal tub from a farm supply shop and a meat smoker with a bathroom fan duct taped to it from so humble beginnings, 10-pound batches, enough to do a 5-gallon homebrew run. And we started with 6-row barley, which, me being the home brewer, I had read Charlie Papazian's book, of course. And, he has this disparaging paragraph in there about 6-row barley is only for the land of micro loggers and macro loggers and, adjunct stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, Brian, 6-row barley may not have a place. And we took a shot at it and it made great beer right out of the first couple of tries. I was like, okay, I'm in, let's do this, and we also met a gentleman, Rick Wasman, out of Sperryville, Virginia, Copper Fox Distilling. He was malting his own barley, the thoroughbred 6-row that we started with. He was making award-winning American single malt 15 years ago, if you can believe that. And so all of these things, all of these aha moments and light bulb moments kind of came together. And, one of our earliest customers, Full Steam Brewing out of Durham, I had met the owner of that brewery, Sean Wilson. We were working together on a campaign called Pop the Cap in North Carolina to get rid of our 6% alcohol law, which of course kept craft beer, completely, pinned down in terms of creativity. So Sean was one of the first people I approached. He was up here in Asheville doing an event, and I bellied up to the bar beside him at Thirsty Monk. And I was like, Sean, I could make local malt using North Carolina grown barley. Would you buy it? And he was like, yeah, I would, Brent. And I was like, okay, well, here's our first customer, so let's keep going. So somehow or another, that move made me Riverbend salesman from the word go. But anyway, we all got started that way. And like I say, started with a 1-ton malt house in 2010, 2011, went to a 10-ton facility in 2014, and then took the big leap and went into a 70,000 square foot facility with room to grow in 2018. So
Brent,
50,000 first year, 5 million this year.
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Do you think those early days was because, not that selling it was easy, but because you were getting locally sourced stuff or selling it locally was a big selling point?
Yeah. It really, in some cases, it was, we were learning our craft. So at some point, people would call and be like, hey, Brent, I want to do some malt. I want to make a beer. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to be honest with you. The batch we just finished is not what we expected. I think it's this color and it has these flavors to it. And they're like, well, just send it on. We'll make something out of it. And I'm like, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
But, flash forward a decade or more later, consistency is key. And if we want to be a part of, year-round IPAs and lagers, we got to deliver the same stuff week in and week out. And so
Sure.
that's probably been the greatest challenge. And, kudos to our growers for growing with us, is that, over the years, they've gotten better, we've gotten better, and that's the key to consistency.
Your customers have needs, right? You've talked about them. We're going to talk about some more about them too. You have needs from your growers, right? How do those conversations go? You're like, hey, I kind of need a little bit more of this, or can you talk to a grower and say, hey, can you refine this in a certain way or anything like that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the conversation, I'll back up and say the good thing about talking with growers in the Southeast is we are talking about winter barley. So it goes in the ground right about now, mid-October, and is harvested in June. So that keeps us out of the way of the main cash crops of the South, corn, soybeans, etc. So that's an easy entree right there. So we're basically saying, hey, while your fields aren't doing a whole lot, could you plant something that will pay you for? Okay, cool. So I've got their attention. But we are kind of a pain. We want specific barley varietals. We want specific specs regarding germination, fungal growth limitations. We use a term called test weight as kind of an easy catch-all. So a healthy, high-quality batch of barley should have at least 48 pounds per bushel test weight. Fantastic quality barley will have like 50 or 52 pound test weight. So we kind of set a floor on test weight. Now, if we were selling into the feed market, no one cares about these things. It's going into animal feed. No one cares. So we offer a premium price because we're asking for a premium grain. And so we kind of lay out all of these things and we say, we need it cleaned, we need it in tote bags. And oh yeah, I also can't take all of it as soon as you harvest it, which is the other thing that is problematic. So our target growers will kind of have a dedicated Riverbend bin on site that's their barley. They order it, a couple truckloads at a time over the course of a year. And, it's on them to keep the bugs at bay and keep the moisture levels at where we need them. And so we're definitely kind of a pain. But by putting all that out in front of everybody from the get-go, everybody knows where we stand and what everyone's expectations are. And so we just kind of lay it out clearly from the start. I want Avalon barley at this level of protein, this level of moisture, this level of germination, and I'm going to take it, 50 to 100,000 pounds at a time over this coming year. Is that okay? And they say, yes, this is the price I need. And we say, okay, fair enough. Let's do this,
It's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about that too, is we pull our customers out of the global market for small grain. So we're not talking about, logging into the Chicago Board of Trade and looking at futures contracts and all of that business. It's a handshake agreement on the back of a pickup truck, is really how we like to do business. And so pulling everybody out of that, they know exactly what they're going to get. We know exactly what we're going to get. That keeps our prices from fluctuating, regardless of what geopolitical things are going on, what kind of climatic issues are going on. You guys may remember a couple of years back, there was a freak rain event out in the Western US near harvest time. They got like an unexpected inch or two of rain and all the barley started sprouting in the head, basically starting to malt itself essentially. And, markets went crazy. Everyone was completely, everyone was freaking out because the malt quality was inevitably going to be impacted. And everyone kept calling me and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, what do you mean what's going on? Our barley was harvested 3-4 months ago. We're fine. It's in the bin.
Oh, yeah.
It's winter barley. Everything that grows out
Sure.
west is spring barley. And so, we find that we have to continually message these kinds of key differentiating factors to everyone, basically, that, by having this smaller supply chain, there's a whole host of benefits that everyone in the brewing and distilling world can take advantage of.
It's amazing. It's a buffer. You've got this buffer built in for both sides. It's amazing. And it's,
sure.
and people don't panic. Now you're like,
right.
I got you.
We haven't, knock on wood, we haven't had a panic yet. And, the other thing too, is we space out our growers across the Southeast. So we're taking advantage of those microclimates. So we have growers in coastal Virginia, central Tennessee. We have, and sort of in the Piedmont portion of North Carolina. And so, if there's an early tropical storm or a late freeze or whatever, we've got options going into harvest that have pretty well served us, and we haven't had any shortages yet.
But how cool is it? But how cool is it though that we know farmers struggle. That's a tough business. That's a tough life. But you guys, you said you're a pain at times, but I'm sure they appreciate it because you're really helping, I would imagine, a lot of farmers out there.
Yeah. We try to be a good partner, and, we're always looking for farmers that are what we call students of the game. The guys that show up at the ag extension events where they're demoing a new, approach to adding fertilizer or, different techniques for planting or herbicide treatment or whatever, the folks that are, basically attending the equivalent of a continuing education kind of thing. Like, those are the folks that are going to have the highest degree of success when it comes to getting good barley out of the field, which supports us making good malt, which supports brewers making great beer.